On June 12, 2026, the Department of Justice approved the biggest media deal in Hollywood history, a deal worth $110.9 billion. And the most stunning part? Netflix, the company that almost pulled it off first, wasn't the winner. This is the story of a secret bidding war that shocked the entertainment world. A 100-year-old studio, two corporate giants fighting over it, and one of the most dramatic reversals in business history. To understand how we got here, you have to understand what Warner Bros. Discovery actually is. This is not just a streaming service. This is a century of culture, a vault of intellectual property so deep it almost defies belief. Warner Bros. Holds the rights to Harry Potter, the DC Universe, Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, The Wizard of Oz, Casablanca, and thousands more titles. HBO alone is considered by many to be the greatest brand in television history. In 2022, Warner Bros. And Discovery merged, creating Warner Bros. Discovery, a media giant worth tens of billions on paper. But the company was drowning in debt, over $40 billion of it, and the streaming wars were burning through cash faster than anyone expected. By mid-2025, WBD was in trouble. The stock had collapsed from its post-merger highs. Subscribers were growing, but not fast enough. And the traditional cable TV business that was supposed to fund the transition, it was dying faster than anyone predicted. So in June 2025, Warner Bros. Discovery made a shocking announcement. They would split the company in two. The streaming and studio business, Warner Bros., HBO, HBO Max, DC Studios, will become one company. The cable networks, CNN, TNT, Discovery, Bleacher Report, would spin off as a separate company called Discovery Global. The idea was to separate the future from past. Investors were dragging down the streaming valuation because of the dying cable business. Separate them and unlock value. It made logical sense, but it also made Warner Bros., the streaming and studio piece, a very attractive acquisition target. That's when Paramount Skydance entered the picture. In September 2025, Paramount, which had recently merged with David Ellison's Skydance Media in a separate multi-billion-dollar deal, quietly approached Warner Bros. Discovery with an offer to buy the whole thing. WBD's board rejected the approach multiple times. They believed a sale wasn't the right path. But then the offers kept coming, getting bigger each time. And in October 2025, WBD's board did something unusual. They put the company up for auction. The bidding opened in November 2025. For companies submitted offers: Netflix, Paramount Skydance, Comcast, and Starz. This was a once-in-a-generation chance to acquire one of the most iconic media libraries ever assembled. And Netflix wanted it badly. On December 5, 2025, Netflix and Warner Bros. Discovery made a stunning joint announcement. Netflix would acquire Warner Bros., the studios, HBO, HBO Max, DC, for a total enterprise value of $82.7 billion. Think about what that number means. Netflix, a company founded in 1997 as a DVD buy-mail service, was paying $82 billion for a Hollywood studio older than the Golden Gate Bridge. The disruptor was buying the establishment it had helped destroy. Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos called it a mission to entertain the world. He talked about combining Stranger Things and Wednesday with Game of Thrones and Harry Potter. Together, the combined library would be the most powerful in streaming history. The WBD board unanimously approved. The deal looked done. But Hollywood isn't Wall Street. The reaction from the entertainment industry was explosive. Theater owners warned this would destroy the box office. Filmmakers worried about what Netflix's content strategy would do to the prestige Warner Bros. Brand. Politicians called for antitrust scrutiny. And then Paramount Skydance refused to walk away. Despite the board's unanimous support for Netflix, Paramount came back with a higher bid, and then a higher one still. The hostile takeover battle that followed became one of the most aggressive in media history. In January 2026, Netflix made a bold move to shore up its position. The company amended the deal from a cash-and stock offer to an all-cash transaction. Every WBD shareholder would receive $27.75 per share. All cash. No uncertainty. No market variability. Netflix had the cash to back it up. The company generates billions in free cash flow every year and had access to committed debt financing from Wells Fargo, BNP, and HSBC. Going all cash was a signal. We are serious, and we can close this. WBD shareholders were scheduled to vote by April 2026. The finish line was in sight. Netflix had the board. Netflix had the financing. Netflix was going to win. And then Paramount did something dramatic. On February 17th, 2026, Netflix granted Paramount a 7-day waiver, a brief window to submit yet another revised offer. Inside that window, Paramount came back with a staggering number, $31 per share. Not for just the streaming business, for all of Warner Bros. Discovery, the entire company. That valued the entire WBD at over $110 billion, a full 8% premium over Netflix's offer on a per-share basis. And crucially, it meant WBD shareholders would get cash for the entire company, including the cable networks that Netflix didn't even want. The WBD board had a fiduciary duty to shareholders. Faced with a $10 per share premium on top of Netflix's offer, the math was hard to argue with. On February 17th, the board announced it would re-enter negotiations with Paramount. 9 days later, Netflix made a quiet, devastating announcement. On February 26th, 2026, Netflix withdrew from the deal. After months of negotiation, a revised all-cash offer, and public declarations that this was a transformational acquisition, Netflix walked away. The next day, Warner Bros. Discovery and Paramount Skydance announced they would merge. The combined entity would own Warner Bros. Studios, HBO, DC Universe, CNN, Paramount Pictures, CBS, MTV, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, BET, and Pluto TV. It would be a media conglomerate unlike anything since the studio system of the 1950s. And behind it all, David Ellison, son of Oracle founder Larry Ellison, and 3 sovereign wealth funds from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. WBD shareholders voted to approve the deal on April 23, 2026. The vote passed with strong institutional support. And then came the waiting, the regulatory gauntlet that every mega deal must survive. The Department of Justice, the FTC, regulators in Europe, the UK, and markets around the world. Critics argued the combined Paramount WBD would be too powerful. One entity controlling Paramount Plus, Max, and a combined cable empire with CNN, TNT, and MSNBC, alongside the most valuable studio film library outside Disney. The concentration of content under one roof worried watchdogs. But on June 12, 2026, the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division gave its approval. The deal was cleared. $110.9 billion. Hollywood's biggest merger since Disney bought 21st Century Fox. And unlike the Netflix deal, this one is actually happening. So what does Netflix actually lose here? More than you might think. Game of Thrones spin-offs were already licensed to HBO Max. Harry Potter content is locked up. The entire DC cinematic universe stays at Warner Bros. And now stays under Paramount's umbrella. Netflix's content moat just got significantly smaller. And there's something deeper here. Netflix bid $82 billion specifically for the studio and streaming piece. Paramount paid $111 billion for the whole company, including the cable networks Netflix explicitly didn't want. What does Paramount plan to do with CNN? With Discovery? With TNT? That remains one of the biggest open questions in media right now. Some analysts argue Netflix actually won by losing. The company preserved its cash, avoided a massive debt load, and can now go on the offensive, spending on originals, acquiring smaller studios, and poaching talent from a newly merged giant that will be distracted by integration for years. Netflix's stock barely moved when the deal fell through. Investors were relieved. Buying WBD's debt along with its content would have been a massive risk. The market seemed to say, we like Netflix as it is. But Netflix still needs big franchise IP to compete. And that question hasn't gone away. Meanwhile, Paramount Skydance's David Ellison is now sitting on what might be the most powerful media asset in the world outside of Disney. He's 41 years old, backed by Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds, and in charge of a combined studio and streaming empire valued over $100 billion. The entertainment industry is reshaping itself at a speed that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Disney, Netflix, and now Paramount Warner are the three giants left standing. Comcast, Peacock, Apple TV Plus, and Amazon Prime are circling. Someone will be forced to make another move. This story isn't over. It's the opening act. The streaming wars that started with Netflix mailing DVDs in red envelopes have evolved into one of the most expensive corporate battles in history. Over $200 billion in acquisition value has been traded in the last 12 months alone. And somewhere in Silicon Valley, Netflix is quietly watching $101 billion worth of content it almost owns slip into a competitor's hands and planning its next move. Because in this industry, standing still is the only thing that guarantees you lose. If this deal teaches us anything, it's that in the modern media economy, the greatest asset isn't technology, it isn't subscribers, and it isn't algorithms. It's stories, the characters people grew up with, the franchises that define generations. That's what $111 billion buys. Netflix tried to buy that, $82 billion worth, and it still wasn't enough. Think about that the next time you're scrolling through your watch list, wondering why there's nothing new to watch. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, subscribe to Money Stories for more breakdowns of the biggest business battles, corporate deals, and financial moments shaping your world. New videos every week. I'll see you in the next one.